Hello, Year 6, Miss Jobbins here with this week's book club. I hope that you're all well and that you've all had an absolutely lovely weekend. I was so impressed by everybody in Cocoon A last week, and I know all of you who are in Cocoon B will also have a fabulous week. So massive, massive, massive well done to all of you in Cocoon A. It's probably a bit weird for you getting back like used to listening to us teachers over this, but if you do have any questions, please let us know. So today we're reading chapters 14 to 16. So, however much I pleaded and scoffed, nothing would convince Roxy Minto that she had not had an encounter with a witch. If you're convinced of something, I guess it's easy to become stubborn about it, if the alternative is admitting that you were wrong and a bit childish. Well, obviously, she's not going to wear a black hat and have warts. That would just give the game away, wouldn't it? She declared. Oh, so the fact that she doesn't look much like a witch proves she's a witch, does it? I said in exasperation. So what if she had had a black pointy hat? What would that prove? That she wasn't a witch? She ignored this bit of logic. And she's got a cauldron and a black cat. Black and white, Roxy, I said wearily. So what? Everything I said was battered back to me with wide-eyed innocence. Our voices were getting louder, and it was becoming an argument, which I didn't want because Roxy was daring and fun. I can prove it, you know, she said, and then her phone rang, a jolly tinkly-tonkly tune on the piano that somehow suited Roxy perfectly. She glanced at the screen, but didn't pick it up. I looked at her quizzically. It's my mum. Gotta go. I barely noticed that Roxy had been alone all this time. I mean, wherever I am, usually there's a parent kicking around somewhere in the background, bringing out juice, checking you're wearing a warm top, or not running with scissors, just being parentish. But Roxy had been parentless all day. Her phone rang out and went to voicemail. Where is your mum? I asked. Roxy jerked her head in the direction of the house. Inside. And she's phoning you. She let out a deep sigh and she jumped up from her chair and stood up. Long story. Another time, eh? It was as if Roxy had been picked up with a bin and her sigh picked up a pin and her sigh was all the air escaping, along with her fun and liveliness and everything else. I would swear that even her sticky up hair lay flatter on her head. She locked the door to the garage and put the key under a stone. She said nothing. She knew I was watching, so I knew I was trusted. She turned and a flicker of light returned to her eyes when she said, Midnight. Tonight? No, in 10 years' time. Of course tonight. She turned and slipped through the gap in the fence. It's the witching hour, she said, and then she was gone, leaving me staring into the thick woods trying to piece together what had been going on. Roxy had said, I can prove it, you know. What did she mean by that? Was it, I can prove it, she did a magic spell, which of course would be yet more nonsense. But there was something in the way she said it, a light of certainty in her eyes, which I couldn't stop thinking about. You see, I was on the point of dismissing Roxy as a harmless crazy. We'd been friendly but not friends. The boy and the woman in the forest cottage would have been left in peace, and Roxy would have grown out of her belief in the witch in the woods. But then the disaster happened, and Roxy and I became the last people to see the witch alive. Chapter 15. I watched the girl go back up the lane. I wanted to go with her, make sure she got home safely, but I do not think Mum would have approved. Besides, she did not live far, on the other side of the woods. She had a funny little shed with an illuminated sign hanging in the door. I knew that much. Biffa jumped into my arms as I stood there. It meant that when the girl turned back to look, she did not see my hand giving a little wave because it was sort of hidden by Biffa. I am not sure. Maybe she did see. R. Minto. It was sewn into her jacket on a label. I saw it when I carried her in. She also had something with wires going into her pocket. Probably one of those mobile telephones or something. I watched her all the way to the bend in the lane in case she turned back again, but she did not. Biffa hopped out of my arms and then gave a little growl which made me smile. Do you like her, Biffa? I said in our language. Me too. I sniffed the air in the lane. The weather had been hot for spring, but it would cool down later. I could smell it. The sky was cloudless, so when the sun dipped, the evening would get cold and Mam would want the fire to be lit to keep the chill from the old stone house. I should have gone right away to the wood store to get some old logs, but I was still thinking of Arminta, her friends in the bushes, and how Mum had been suspicious of them. Then Biffa came back with a big beetle she had caught and dumped it back on my feet, where it lay waggling its legs. "No, Biff," I laughed. "Leave the beetles alone." I crouched down to the thick flick the insect back the right way up, and it scuttled gratefully into the undergrowth. I completely forgot about fetching the old logs, which turned out to be the biggest mistake of the last 1,000 years. Chapter 16. It was past midnight when the fire siren started. I got up to look out of the bedroom window, Libby's bedroom, where I had been moved to make room for Auntie Alice and Jasper. My stomach lurched with fear when I saw a glow of fire coming from the woods, fierce enough to light up the sky, although it was still quite a distance. I knew instantly what was burning. "Dad! Dad!" I called. "Struth!" I heard. "That's a hell of a conflagration." I swung round and Jasper was standing behind me in his pajama bottoms, leaning on a stack of old boxes that hadn't been unpacked yet. A smell of smoke was seeping through the open window, so I shut it. "There's a house there, you know," I said, "in the woods." "Really? Well, I hope they're all right. Ghastly things, fires, eh?" Jasper scratched his thick beard, and his fingers travelled from his cheek to his throat and his chest, and it was hairy all the way down. Beard never actually stopped, but just merged with the rest of the hair on his body. I heard the doorbell go downstairs. "I bet that's Roxy," I thought. Dad opened the front door, not to Roxy, but to a fireman, and while I ran down the stairs, he spoke to Dad. Through the door I could see the fire engine in the street, its blue lights flashing. "Sorry to wake you, sir, but we have to run a hose down the side of your house. If the fire spreads, it poses a risk to the buildings, so we have to soak the trees," he said. The firefighter wasn't expecting a refusal. I could tell that much, because the others were already up spooling the hose from the fire engine and opening the fire hydrant right outside our house. "No need for alarm, son," the fireman said to me. "Just a precaution." "What about the house? The witch? The house in the woods? Are they all right?" "Don't know anything about that, son. Now, excuse me." He turned his attention to the others, who were by now running up the junk-filled alley, shifting stuff to make room. He was lying. I knew it at once, and I felt scared. I stood on the front path watching the firemen. That's when I saw Roxy, in short pajamas, shivering in her doorway, fingering the dressing gown behind her ear. Our eyes met, and we both knew what the other was thinking. I beckoned for her to come over. I wanted to talk to her about what was happening, about the possibility that the witch's house was on fire, that people might be hurt, or worse. She shook her head and pointed upstairs, mouthing the word "Mum." Then my mum came up behind me. "Come on, Aidan, we mustn't get in the way. If you want to see what's going on, look from upstairs." There were loads of neighbours in slippers out in the street watching the commotion, and I didn't see what the difference I was making, but I couldn't be bothered to argue. Back at the bedroom window I saw another fire truck arrive, one with a huge ladder, which they extended higher than the houses. The fireman who climbed up it then directed those and the ground where to point the hose, and the huge arch of water sprayed out over the trees till they were soaking and dripping. The orange glow of the fire meanwhile grew bigger and spread, getting closer. Showers of sparks would fly up into the purple sky when a tree came crashing down. Then a few minutes later, that part of the wood went up in flames as the sparks caught hold of the dry leaves on the ground. Dad came into my room. "Pack some clothes, son. Use your sports bag. The firefighters say we must have to evacuate." I stared, not understanding what he'd said. "Evacuate. Leave the house. For safety. Chop chop." "But we're safe here, aren't we?" I protested. "Not if the fire gets much closer. Look." He pointed out of the window where another tree, much closer than the others, had a small tongue of flame licking up the trunk. I could make out the branches catching fire before the hose was directed onto the flames went out. I pulled some jeans over my pajamas and found a thick sweater and put that on too. Grace Darling Close is a circular dead end, and at the road had filled with vehicles and people. Sue and Prue, the ladies from next door, both wore identical blue dressing gowns. Sue was holding a huge and cross-looking ginger Tom that was hissing at every passing fireman. "Ah, don't fire! He is very just like being friendly," I heard her say in her German accent. which I thought was stretching the truth. As all 3 fire engines, I counted 2 police cars, a fire support car, and a yellow ambulance car. As I watched another car pulled up, the 2 women got out of the. Sorry, I'm going to pause, Joe. Where it's naughty, Joe. As well as 3 fire engines, I counted 2 police cars, a fire support car, and a yellow ambulance car. As I watched, another car pulled up and 2 women got out of them holding a movie camera and a portable light. She immediately started filming pretty much everything. The trunks, the huddle of neighbours. I wondered about my slippers, just looking at this strange gathering. Sue and Prue were talking to the reporter. Our cats are very agitated, aren't they, Prudence? She said, and Prue nodded in agreement. Thomas here has already emptied his barrels. Shouldn't, haven't you, Thomas? You wicked old thing. Thomas yawned. And then I heard a voice rising above the general hubbub. Put me down! Put me down, dar you! I'm fine. Will you let me go? Along with everything else, I turned in the direction of the voice. It was coming from Roxy's house, where 2 firemen were carrying what looked like a large chair down from the front steps, draped in blankets with a head in a hairnet poking through the top of them. Here, put me down! No, here, you imbecile! Are you deaf? A hand appeared from under the blankets and actually hit one of the firemen in his yellow helmet in time with their words, Stop it! Hit! Stop it! Hit! Stop! Hit! They got to the end of the path and put the chair down, and only then did I realise that it was a wheelchair. What on earth is wrong with you all? She said, gathering a blanket round her. Out of the slapping range, the fireman she had been hitting managed a wry smile. You're welcome, madam. Only too happy to be of service and save you from a fiery grave. Fiery grave, my foot! I was perfectly fine. What on earth? Get that damn thing out of my face! How dare you? Her attention had switched to the camerawoman who, spotting the commotion, had scuttled over and started filming the lady screaming at the fireman. I'm sorry, said the camerawoman. I was just wondering if you could say a few words to the television news. Yes, I can, said the lady. Is that thing on? Right. Here, a few words for the television news. She let off a volley of swear words like F and B and another B, plus some that I didn't even know. And it was such a vicious string of swearing, so loud that even the fireman she had hit started to laugh. The woman said, thanks, and slunk off. Then Roxy was next to me. Met my mum, have you? She said, indicating to the lady in the wheelchair. Hello, I stammered. How do you do? She didn't even look at me. Go away! So, that is the end of our 3 chapters, 14, 15, and 16. I hope that you've enjoyed. Your question today is that we've read some really intriguing and interesting description about the fire from the perspective of Aidan. For example, fire licking the trunk. What we would like you to do is write a short description of Roxy's reaction to the fire from her point of view when she was standing outside the house. Your description should be no more than 5 sentences in length. Remember to use a forest. So that is your alliteration, figurative language, onomatopoeia, repetition, emotive language, similes, metaphors and personification, and trick of 3. So, we would like you to write a short description of Roxy's reaction to the fire from her point of view when she was standing outside. Your description should include no more than 5 sentences in length. Remember to use a forest. For example, I wrote, or Miss Salem wrote, as I stared out into the wooded wilderness towards the hellish inferno that was threatening to grasp and shatter our once tranquil existence, I turned and offered a knowing nod in his direction, keen not to allow him to see the terror that was raging inside. Was this my fault? The air became suddenly impossible to breathe. I could not be sure if this was a I could not be sure if this was a consequence of the thick smoke that now swirled around me, or as if it was the weight of uncertainty and panic and guilt that began to ooze from each of my pores. One thing I was sure of, though, life would never be the same again. Look forward to reading them. Hope you are well. Speak to you soon. Bye.